Welcome back to Starbuzz. Bombshell emails and covert audio tapes have cracked open a hidden world of bribery, secret backdoor deals, and blatant abuse of public funds, finally revealing how Mayor Tiffany Henyard clawed her way to power. Her meticulously built persona as a smooth-talking, untouchable powerhouse began to crumble as evidence surfaced, pulling the curtain back on a string of shady moves. Once a towering presence in Dalton's political scene, her face plastered across towering billboards while she glossed over suspicious budgets. Henyard was now frozen in disbelief, her expression drained as the truth came crashing down. The citizens of Alain, once loyal to the core, sat speechless. The woman they trusted for years had just been exposed as a fraud. But that was just the beginning. In a fit of rage, Henyard slammed her fist onto the table so hard the chair screeched backward on the glossy floor. She stood up, voice trembling, with anger, and shouted, "This is a setup!" The courtroom didn't flinch. The judge's gavel came down with thunderous authority, cutting through the tension and silencing the chaos. But Henyard wasn't backing off. She jabbed a finger toward the prosecution, screaming, "This is political. You don't want to see a strong woman succeed." The air turned heavy with irony. Here stood a mayor accused of intimidating city officials, inflating government salaries, and pouring public funds into murky projects, now casting herself as the victim. It was classic Henyard, leaning hard into the martyr card, desperate to flip the script. In one last, desperate play to shift the blame, she turned on her own legal team. "You were supposed to handle this," she snapped, her voice thick with venom. One attorney fumbled with his notes, visibly humiliated, while another refused to look her in the eye. The cracks in her empire weren't just visible, they were unmistakable. For the first time in her career, Henyard had nothing left to spin. No distractions, no excuses. The truth had caught up to her. In a dramatic scene, she snatched her designer handbag, tore off her mic, and stormed out of the courtroom. The room held its breath. The once invincible mayor of Dalton was walking away, abandoning the fight. But silence didn't last long. The very people she had deceived, manipulated, and betrayed erupted in applause. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived. Henyard was running out of places to hide. The courthouse spiraled into chaos, officials slamming their desks for order, reporters rushing to follow the fleeing mayor. "Did you see her face?" Someone laughed. "I told you she was dirty," another yelled. "That's what happens when you steal from the people's pockets." A third voice shouted over the commotion. Inside, Henyard's inner circle sat stunned, scrambling to contain the damage. Phones rang off the hook. Panic spread. No one was safe now. Outside, the media descended like a swarm. As Henyard stormed down the courthouse steps, the click of her heels echoed across the pavement. Reporters pounced. "Mayor Henyard, any comment on the leaked recordings? Is it true millions in public funds are missing? Will you resign after today's hearing?" She said nothing. Her expression was stone, lips pressed tight, as her security tried to muscle a path forward. But the press wouldn't let up. Cameras closed in, voices rising. She was trapped in a circle of questions with no way out. And then, the moment everything shifted. A voice cut through the noise. A woman stepped in front of her path. It was the former treasurer of Dalton, the one who had stepped down months ago, citing corruption and financial misconduct under Henyard's leadership. Her eyes locked with the mayor's, burning with defiance. "Do you really think you can outrun this, Tiffany?" she spat, her voice sharp and unwavering. For a split second, Henyard looked rattled. The woman who once ruled with an iron grip now stood cornered, not by lawyers or judges, but by someone who knew exactly what she was capable of. Sensing the drama, the media turned their lenses toward the confrontation. It felt like the final chapter of a long, painful saga. Would Henyard dodge again? Or had the truth finally boxed her in? The people of Dalton watched on, breathless. This could be the moment their city was finally freed from the grip of its most controversial figure. Tiffany Henyard stood in the center of the media firestorm, fully aware this was a battle she couldn't win. Flashes exploded from every angle. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and there, in the eye of it all, stood the once untouchable super mayor, now reduced to the face of desperation. She wasn't there to plead. She was there to make sure Tiffany Henyard finally faced the truth. You can walk out of that courtroom, but you can't outrun the truth, Tiffany, the former treasurer shouted, her voice slicing through the tension. For the first time that day, Henyard froze. The armor she had worn for years, her calm, calculated front, began to crack. But the treasurer didn't stop there. You silenced every one of us. But not anymore, she continued, her voice growing, stronger as the camera shutters clicked. You can't silence the truth. The crowd around them swelled, pressure mounting. Henyard, visibly rattled, hesitated to move. Then, in a reckless moment, she leaned in, just inches from the former treasurer's face, and muttered something low, sharp, and threatening. But what Henyard didn't realize was that the whole scene was live-streamed. The treasurer smirked, turned to the cameras, and declared, "You heard that! She just threatened me again." Instantly, social media blew up. Hashtags erupted across platforms. The fallout was immediate. Henyard's attempt to control the narrative had failed spectacularly, and the world had just watched it live. Inside, the hearing rolled on, without her. No more whispered deals, no more buried recordings. With Henyard gone, the prosecution laid out the full scope of her empire. And it wasn't just scandalous, it was staggering, a jaw-dropping $30 million in financial irregularities. The courtroom reeled in shock. The people of Dalton, who had watched this drama drag on for years, were finally seeing the full truth. Henyard's web of lies was unraveling fast. The lead prosecutor stood firm. "Your Honor," he said, his voice heavy, "we have uncovered financial transactions totaling over $30 million. The room went dead silent. The numbers were too big to ignore. This wasn't sloppy accounting. It was organized, deliberate embezzlement. The evidence kept coming. Fake invoices, shell corporations, consulting payments with no real services. And then came the biggest blow. Some of those transactions didn't even lead back to Dalton. They traced to luxury properties in other states, money meant for roads, schools, and safety projects rerouted to fund lavish estates. One question echoed through the courtroom. Who owned them? The answer? Devastating. Members of Henyard's inner circle, her closest allies, were implicated. And, allegedly, her boyfriend had ties to some of those properties, the same boyfriend who was suspiciously missing from the hearing. Prosecution laid bare the full scope of corruption. It became undeniable. This wasn't political mismanagement. It was calculated, criminal, and malicious, and Henyard wasn't even there to defend herself. Then the judge, voice echoing through the courtroom, made the call. This court is now authorizing a formal criminal investigation into Mayor Henyard's financial conduct. A stunned hush fell over the room. The rumors, the whispers, the anonymous tips. It was all real. And now it was official. A federal investigation was underway. Outside, word of the announcement reached the streets. The residents of Dalton, who had waited years for justice, erupted in cheers. "Lock her up! We finally got her!" they chanted, waving signs and cheering as the courthouse steps became ground zero for a political reckoning. But just blocks away, Henyard, still convinced she could spin the story, had no idea what had just been unleashed. She thought she still had time, that she could twist the truth, that maybe, just maybe, she could ride out the storm. She was wrong. Inside her car, her phone rang. One of her top advisors. She hesitated, then snapped, "What?" On the other end, panic. "Madam Mayor, it's bad. Really bad." Her face went pale. Silence followed. Then, finally, the words that sealed her fate. "It's federal. They're coming for you." She felt her pulse stop. Federal charges. This wasn't damage control anymore. This was the end game. She tried to steady her breath, but the pressure was crushing. For the first time in her career, she had no plan. No spin. No control. The phones kept ringing. Messages flooded in. But she already knew. The empire she built on fear, lies, and greed was collapsing. Inside the courthouse, the judge's order echoed. The investigation was greenlit. It was real. And there was no turning back. Outside, the chants grew louder. The celebration erupted. And Henyard? She sat in silence, inside a car that once represented power. Now, her cage. Her phone buzzed. Again? But she didn't answer. The weight of her downfall pressed down like never before. Her career, over. Her secrets, exposed. Her grip on power, gone. Tiffany Henyard had once ruled Dalton like a queen. Now, she was a fugitive from accountability, cornered by the truth she thought she could outrun. The very police officers who once served as her security now waited for the order to act. Her inner circle had vanished. Her staff scattered. Her boyfriend, gone. And in the darkest moment of her political life, she realized she had no one left. She stared down at her buzzing phone, paralyzed. She whispered to herself, "They're coming for everything." And she was right. Every deal, every dollar, every hidden account, every luxury property, all of it was about to come crashing down. Across town, the media was in overdrive. Breaking news banners flashed. Breaking. Mayor Tiffany Henyard under federal investigation. $30 million scandal unfolds. But then came a twist no one expected. A whistleblower from inside her own office stepped forward. With a bombshell. "I worked there for years," the woman said, her voice shaking. "I watched the money move. I saw how taxpayer dollars were funneled into private accounts. And when I tried to speak up, I was threatened." The interviewer leaned in, stunned. Threatened by who? And just like that, Henyard's world, built on threats and intimidation, began to crumble on live television. The whistleblower raised a small recorder to the camera. "I kept the proof," she said. "You're about to hear it." Inside her car, Henyard stared out the window, numb. The walls were closing in. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution pushed for a full-scale financial probe. And the judge granted it. Gasps filled the chamber. This was it. The once untouchable mayor was now the target of a full federal investigation. And then the next bombshell hit. An arrest warrant had just been issued, not for Henyard, but for her chief financial advisor. The news spread instantly. The dominoes were falling, and Tiffany Henyard was next. But then came the real shock. The FBI was now involved. The investigation had gone federal. Panic gripped Tiffany Henyard. Her breathing quickened as she turned to her lawyer, voice tight with desperation. "Fix this," she demanded. But instead of his usual calm reassurance, her lawyer said nothing. Just a silent, heavy look, the kind that said everything. Even he couldn't save her now. Tiffany Henyard, once the most powerful and feared leader Dalton had ever seen, sat in stunned silence. She knew it. Her empire was collapsing. And for the first time, she wasn't in control. Her days of spinning the truth, silencing critics, and dodging accountability were over. Outside the car, the chants from the crowd roared louder, echoing through the streets. The people of Dalton, who had endured years of bullying, cover-ups, and corruption, were celebrating. They weren't just watching history unfold. They were the history. The reign of Tiffany Henyard had ended. She had spent years manipulating, deceiving, and intimidating her way to the top. Now, she sat frozen in the back seat of her luxury vehicle, watching everything she'd built collapse around her. This wasn't another PR nightmare. It was the end, and things were only getting worse. With the FBI now leading the probe, the scope of the investigation exploded. Financial records were being seized. Phones were being tapped. Associates were being questioned, and many were flipping. One by one, those closest to her were turning over key evidence. Documents, passwords, recordings. 30. Pressure was mounting fast. More arrests were expected. And soon, the question on everyone's mind: would Tiffany Henyard try to cut a deal to save herself? Or would she make one final desperate attempt to escape? Time was running out. Her options were dwindling. And the people of Dalton, people she had silenced, threatened, and stolen from, were watching closely. This wasn't just a political scandal anymore. It was a reckoning. One they had waited for. One they had earned. Inside the car, Henyard stared blankly out the window as the crowd's chants grew louder. "Lock her up!" A thunderous cry, echoing justice through the streets. She had nowhere left to run, no one left to call, and no spin strong enough to rewrite the truth. The web of lies she had so carefully crafted for years had finally unraveled. And the truth? It had come for her.